So have you ever had someone come up to you and say something like this? The reason I don't go to church is because there's so many hypocrites there. The church is just full of hypocrites, and so I don't want to go to the church. Well, I don't know how you handle that particular question or statement when it's lobbed at you, but I'd like you to consider maybe responding something like this. Well, no kidding. Yes, we have hypocrites there. We've got people with all kinds of issues and situations in their life. And yes, we have some hypocrites too. You got your Bible? I want you to turn to Acts chapter 9 with me this morning as we get started. Acts chapter 9. If you could turn me down just a freckle. I may keep Mackenzie awake if I talk too loud. Isn't she beautiful? So in Acts the 9th chapter, this guy is described that's having he's a really rough character. His name is Saul. And it begins this way. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. This is the description of a wild man, a crazy man, isn't it? I mean, you look at this. He is breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. It was his desire to murder Christians. Persecute Christians, harm Christians, kill Christian people. He's like a contracted killer, if you will. If you look back at the 8th chapter and the 3rd verse, it says, Saul began to destroy the church, going from house to house. Just picture that image. Going from house to house, he dragged off men and women and put them into prison. And I say, what kind of person would do that? What kind of crazy, sadistic person would go from house to house to see if there are any Christians living there, and if they find Christians, grabbing them by the hair, grabbing them by the throat, whatever, and dragging them off down a street to go put them in prison? If this guy had come to your town, I think you would spread the word as quickly as possible. Look out. Be careful. This guy is here, and he is dangerous. And I'm sure the early church was praying something like this. God, take care of this guy. God, you got to get him. You got to protect us from this guy. He is dangerous. Please do something. I don't care what you do, but just do something about this mean, angry, violent guy. Watch the story back in the 9th chapter. So this guy Saul, he went to the high priest and he asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, the Christians, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed down on him and he fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now, he replied, now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but they did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. And for 3 days, he was blind and did not eat and drink anything. And then the story goes on that this guy, God calls on this man Ananias, who was not very excited about his task. God says, Ananias, I want you to go to, are you ready for this? I want you to go to Saul. And when Ananias hears this, he's reluctant, I guess, as we all would be. You want me to go into the lion's den? You want me to go where my life is going to be put in danger. But the Bible says Ananias does go. Who knows here in this room that sometimes when God asks us to do things, it's not always easy things to do. Sometimes He challenges us. Sometimes He puts things in our path that aren't so easy to do, but He always empowers us, doesn't He? He always gives us the ability to do whatever He's asking us to do. And that's what He does with Ananias. Ananias goes to him and he shares the gospel with him. He tells him about Jesus, and Saul ends up confessing his faith in Jesus Christ, and Ananias baptizes him. And all of a sudden, this incredible man, I mean, if you can imagine this incredible man becomes a Jesus follower. Now, if this guy were to show up to your church next Sunday, how would you deal with that? How would he be welcomed? I mean, would we give him a donut? I mean, would you welcome him to come and sit by you? I mean, how in the world would you handle something like that? How do you welcome a guy like that into your church who has been so painful to your church? Well, it would have been easier, I would think, if every single member of that church were just to go stand and look in a mirror and look at themselves. Oh, how we have a way of ranking and judging one another. And then the Bible comes right out and says, for we've all sinned and we've all fallen short of the glory of God. There's not one righteous, not even you. No, not one. Thankfully, there was this man by the name of Barnabas. And Barnabas was just a friend to everybody. Barnabas was just a guy that loved Jesus, and he loved seeing people connected to Jesus. And so when Saul comes through the doors of the church building and everybody is, Barnabas steps forward and he takes his arm and he puts it around Saul. And he says, welcome, Brother Saul. I'm glad you're here today. You're in the right place. Saul talks about his life and how the gospel of Jesus and the church absolutely transformed his life. Listen to a couple of passages where he describes everything that took place. The first one is Galatians chapter 1. For you have heard of my previous way of life in Jerusalem, how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. How do you like that for a testimony? How do you like that for a guy's conversation out there in the foyer? I know you've all heard about my previous life and how I tried to destroy this church. I tried to absolutely destroy it. He shares another little verse, 1 Timothy chapter 1. Here's a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. And everybody says, yeah. And then Saul says, of whom I am the worst. Wow. You know, when someone says, you Christians are the worst, you might respond by saying, I know. That's why we need Jesus so much. That's why we need His church so much. So this guy Saul, who by this time has had his name changed to Paul as a part of this transformation process that takes place in his life, he can't keep what has happened to himself, and so he sets out to tell as many people as he possibly can about this man Jesus. And what he chooses to do is go far and wide, establishing little churches all over the place. Every time he would go into a village or a community or a city, he would start a church. And what he would want to do is bring people together so that they could also hear about this wonderful man, Jesus. And his travels took him to the city of Thessalonica. Thessalonica. And in this town of Thessalonica, he did what he always did. He established a church. He brought people together and he started a church in this town. And one of the things that he said to the people is found in 1 Thessalonians 3 and verse 12. He said, "May the Lord make your love increase and overflow for each other and for everyone else, just as our love does for you." Wow. This guy has been changed. He has been transformed. And what he wants to see in churches, I mean, of all the things, if we were to start compiling a list, what do you think the church ought to be? What do you think the church ought to be known for? High on his list was, listen, we just need to love each other more and more and more. Our love needs to increase and abound and go higher and higher. This hard man, this brutal man, this violent man has been changed. And it was the gospel and it was the church that had done it. Paul knew how important the church of Christ had been in his life and in his life transformation. And what he's saying to the people is take care of it. Love one another. I want you to turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 with me this morning, because as we're working our way on Sunday mornings through this letter, I want you to see two descriptive terms that Paul uses to describe the church that he has fallen in love with here in Thessalonica. He uses two words, two similes to describe the relationship that he has with the people that make up the church. Look in 1 Thessalonians 2, I'll begin in verse 7. He says to them, "For we were gentle among you like a mother caring for her little children. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. Surely you remember, brothers, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel to you. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory." So Paul is writing this letter and he's trying to figure out how to convey how much he loves them. Remember, he at one time had been against them, but now he is not only for them, he loves them. But what words do you use to describe how much you love someone? Well, Paul chooses two. The first one is, I love you like a mother. Like a mother. And you think about a mother who is gentle and caring and loving, a mother who is sharing. He says, verse 7, we were gentle among you, like a mother caring for her little child. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel, but our lives as well. Well, I'd imagine in a hospital room over in St. Louis this morning, there's a mother holding her newborn child, and I would imagine these are the words that describe that relationship: gentle, caring, loving, sharing. You just picture that beautiful, beautiful relationship, that bond between a mother and her children. Just holding them tight and loving on them and just being so gentle with them. Well, that's Paul's description of his relationship with these people, the church. And then he spills over and uses this phrase, Father. or this word father, he says, I loved you like a father. Words like encouraging and comforting and urging. He says, for you know that we dealt with each of you, verse 11, as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God. So it's the mother who is so gentle, so caring, so supportive. And here is the father who stands as a figure pointing children to the best way, encouraging them, comforting them, urging them to live lives that please and honor God. So Paul says, when I think about you guys in Thessalonica, when I think about the church there, I don't know, I relate to you as a mother who just cares for, loves so gently her children. But also, I kind of see my relationship with you as a father who is, encouraging you, kind of an authoritative figure who is wanting you to be the best you can be and to do all that you can do. I saw a video this week that I want to show you. Just play it. This is a little boy, a young man with Down syndrome, and he has been at summer camp all week, or all summer, and he comes back and sees his dad for the first time in weeks. And I mean, it's just the epitome of, I think, what Paul is describing here. It's the beautiful relationship between a parent and a child, that there's nothing that could separate them. They just love each other so much. And I think that's what Paul is describing here. I think that's what he sees when he looks at the church. He could have seen all the flaws. He could have seen all the disappointments, all the ways in which they were not living the way they should. But he said, as I think about the church that has so changed and transformed my life, I think about how much a mother and a father love their children. It was a couple of years ago that I started watching this show. If you could go to the next slide. A few years ago, I was watching this show, and it's called Alone. I don't know if any of you watched that or not. Any of you ever seen that show? But the premise is this, that they take like 10 people. And they send them out. They send them out to this far remote location. And one by one, they drop them off so that they have contact with absolutely no one else. And they got to survive. They've got to survive. But they've got to survive alone. They've got to, first of all, deal with hunger. They've got to go find food. And of course, the deal is the one that can stay there the longest wins, and usually wins, a bunch of money. And so here they are. They are out here, and they've got to deal with hunger. They've got to deal with the cold and the heat, and they've got to deal with all those things. And then one by one, as time goes by, they make the call to say, hey, I'm throwing in the towel. I give. I can't take it anymore. Come and get me. And here's the thing that I've noticed on this program. It's not the hot and the cold that gets them. It's not even most often the hunger that gets them. It's the isolation. It's the loneliness. They cannot stand being alone for that much time. They cannot stand the isolation, being away from the people that they love. I think when Paul thought about the church in Thessalonica, and I guess what I'm yearning for and praying for and hoping for is that when you think about this little church, when you think about the family at Vaughan Hill, that in spite of our foibles, and in spite of our inconsistencies, in spite of our mistakes, in spite of the things that aren't what you would like for them to be or aren't what they should be, you just are so connected that your love for this church and for these people, in spite of our hypocrisy, in spite of all of that, you love this church so very much. You know, one of the big questions I think that, and I tried to impart to my children, and I still tell people today is, where are you going to find your friend group? Where are you going to find your friend group? Because here's the thing, you will become like the people that you hang around. You show me who your friend group is. You show me who you hang out with, and I'll show you the kind of person you're going to be in 5 years or 10 years down the road. It always happens that way. The Apostle Paul used to hang out with people that hated the church, hated Christian people. And guess what? He became extremely hostile to Christian people. But then he started hanging out with Christian people in local churches, and he became, well, gentle and caring and loving and sharing and encouraging and comforting. He became all of these things. He urged them. He found people there that were like a mother and a father to him, or that he related to as a mother and a father. And he became like those people, and they would become like him. He knew what life was like out there in the world, and he knew what life was like in the family of God. In Paul's letter, he makes it very, very clear that what he wants more than anything else is to go and be with God. Paul put his cards on the table and he says, more than anything else, I want to be with God. I want to know Him, I love Him, and I want to spend all of eternity with Him, and I want that to be just as soon as possible. But until that happened, what do we do? And that's what the books of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians are about. What do we do while we wait? What do we do while we're waiting for that time that each one of us can go and be with God? What do we do while we're waiting on Jesus to return? Paul says, church, love each other, forgive each other, encourage each other, be there for one another. I need a place like that in my life. I realized it a long time ago. And I would imagine each one of you do as well. I want to tell all of our guests this morning, if you need a place to call home, if you need a place to be encouraged, a place to be comforted, a place to be loved, I invite you to the Vaughn Hill Church of Christ. You know what you'll find there? You'll find people that are stumbling and struggling. You'll find people with some addictions and some bad habits. You'll find people that are messing up from time to time. But they're giving all of that to God, and they realize how bad they need to surround themselves with the right kind of people. Fellow strugglers, fellow challengers to this life. And I invite you to come to this church. And yes, you may even find a few of us hypocrites hanging out here, but it is our desire to please, honor, and glorify God with this one life that we've been given, and to do that surrounded by people who likewise are struggling, but they've just fallen in love with Jesus Christ as well. Well, we're going to finish this morning with one more song. It's a song I requested. I invite the praise team to come on back up here. I want you to stand with me this morning, and just kind of an anthem of your heart and just something that is inside you. I just want you to raise this roof as we conclude our time together this morning with singing this great, wonderful old hymn, Blessed Assurance. Let's sing together.